She was married in the morning, but by nightfall she was dead. What happened next will haunt you. Once upon a time, in a town where wealth ruled and power was feared, there lived a young woman named Zainab. She grew up full of hope, love, and dreams for the future. Her parents, Mama Sadia and Mr. Musa, and her younger brother Sul, were all she had and all she loved. When Ibrahim Danjuma, heir to one of the wealthiest families in the region, asked for her hand in marriage, her heart soared. The drums of celebration still echoed faintly in the distance when Zainab sat before the mirror in the massive bedroom of the Danjuma mansion. Her wedding gown, once bright white, was wrinkled and faintly stained from a long day of dancing, hugging, and smiling for cameras. Her cheeks ached from smiling, but her heart glowed with hope. She could not believe she was now a wife in one of the wealthiest families in town, a wife to Ibrahim Danjuma. She touched her cheeks, then her lips, whispering a prayer her mother had taught her. Let this marriage bring peace, children, and joy. Let me be a blessing to his family as I was to my mother. But behind that prayer, her stomach twisted. Earlier, during the reception, she had caught Ibrahim's mother watching her with cold, piercing eyes, as though daring her to misstep. Even her husband had been strangely silent on the ride home. He smiled for the cameras. Yes, he held her hand in front of guests, but behind closed doors, he seemed distant, his eyes glassy. He smiled forced at me, she whispered softly, standing from the mirror and turning to him. He sat on the edge of the bed, his back to her. Are you all right? Yes, he said too quickly. Then he stood, avoiding her gaze. I just need to freshen up. He left the room before she could say another word. Zainab sighed. She blamed it on nerves. Men too could be shy on their wedding night. She told herself not to worry. Then she heard soft chatter downstairs. She stood by the window and pulled aside the heavy curtains. She saw something that made her breath catch. In the courtyard below, under the glow of the moonlight, 3 men in long white robes stood in a circle. One of them, she thought, was her father-in-law. Another looked like the family priest she had seen earlier at the traditional marriage. They were chanting something she couldn't hear. In the middle of their circle sat a clay pot, smoke rising from it, carrying a strange smell. Zainab stepped back quickly, her heart pounding. She tried to convince herself it was a normal ritual. Families did prayers after weddings, didn't they? Maybe they were blessing her union, but deep down, something inside her whispered, run. Moments later, the door creaked open. Ibrahim entered again, but he wasn't alone. His mother followed, her wrapper tied tightly across her chest, her eyes sharp like a hawk's. Behind her were 2 of Ibrahim's uncles. Zainab, Mama Hadiza said smoothly, her voice like cold palm oil. It is time. Zainab frowned. Time? Time for what, Mama? Ibrahim and I. Silence. The woman's voice cut through the room like a knife. You were chosen for this family for one reason. Do not resist. Zainab's blood ran cold. She looked at her husband for answers, but he refused to meet her eyes. Instead, he moved to the wardrobe and pulled out a folded white cloth. Ibra. Zainab's voice trembled. What's happening? Ibrahim swallowed hard. His voice cracked when he spoke. Forgive me, Zainab. I didn't have a choice. 2 men grabbed her arms before she could move. She screamed, but one of them slapped her across the face, silencing her cry. Her head spun from the impact. They dragged her out of the bedroom and down a dark hallway lit only by oil lamps. Her bare feet scraped the coat tiles, her wedding gown trailing like a wounded bird. When they reached the courtyard, Zainab saw the circle of men she had spotted earlier. The pot still burned in the center. Now, she could smell the sharp, metallic scent of blood. Chickens lay slaughtered by the side, their feathers scattered like torn paper. No, she whispered, shaking her head violently. Please. Not me. Mama Hadiza stepped closer, her face illuminated by firelight. It must be you. The covenant demands the bride's blood. You are the sacrifice that will renew this family's wealth. Zainab screamed, thrashing against the grip of the men, but they held her tighter. She turned desperately to Ibrahim. Ibra, you promised to love me. You promised before God. Her husband's face twisted with guilt and fear. I'm sorry. If I refuse, we all die. Her heart shattered at that moment. Not only was she about to die, she was betrayed by the man she had given her heart to. They forced her into the circle, the priest chanting louder, pouring palm wine over her head. She struggled, tears streaming down her face, her cries echoing into the night sky. "Please, don't do this. Mama, uncle. Please," she begged, but their eyes were cold, their faces set like stone. The blade gleamed in the firelight as the priest raised it high. Her last stop before the knife came down was of her mother's voice, warning her that the Danjumas were not ordinary people. The knife cut through her throat swiftly, her white wedding gown soaked in blood, the red spreading like a flower blooming. The men lowered her lifeless body onto the ground. The blood poured into the clay pot, feeding the fire. The family chanted in unison, their voices trembling with greed and fear, but none of them noticed the way her eyes, wide open in death, glowed faintly red before they dulled. Nor did they hear the faint whisper carried by the night wind, "I will return." The news of Zainab's death traveled like wildfire, but it did not come gently to her family. It was Zainab's younger brother, Sul, who first overheard whispers in the marketplace the next morning. Two women were bent over baskets of tomatoes, murmuring, "Did you hear? That new bride in town, Zainab. They say she died the same night of her wedding." Sul froze. His heart began to pound. He dropped the yam he was carrying and rushed home, his legs shaking. By the time he arrived, the whispers had already reached their compound. Neighbors gathered at the gate, their faces dark, their voices hushed. When Zainab's mother, Mama Sadia, stepped outside and heard the words, "Your daughter is gone," her knees buckled. She let out a piercing scream that tore through the compound. Her wrapper slipped as she rolled on the ground, clutching the dust, wailing, "Chuckle. Why my daughter? She was just married yesterday. Yesterday. Oh, oh." Zainab's father stood frozen, his walking stick trembling in his hand. He tried to speak but no words came out. His lips quivered, and his eyes filled with tears he was too proud to shed. The family's grief was not just sorrow, it was confusion and rage. How could a bride who danced and laughed at her wedding be lying dead the very same night? Some villagers claimed it was spiritual attack. But for Zainab's family, nothing made sense. Mama Sadia tore at her headscarf, crying out that they had given her daughter away in joy, only to have her returned in shame. The Danjumas handled everything swiftly, as though they had nothing to hide. When Zainab's body was returned to her parents, they explained with practiced sorrow that she had fallen suddenly ill during the night. She complained of chest pain, Zainab's new mother-in-law said, wiping fake tears. Before we could rush her to the hospital, she gave up. The family was too shocked to question. To them, it felt like wicked fate had struck. Neighbors shook their heads, muttering that perhaps it was Ugbanj's spirit child who never stays long, or that Zainab's enemies in the village had poisoned her destiny. No one dared to accuse the Danjumas. Their wealth and influence shielded them from suspicion. Her burial was carried out with speed. The elders debated whether she should be buried in her husband's compound, since tradition demanded that once a woman is married, she belongs to her husband's household even in death. The Danjumas insisted on it. "She is our wife, Mr. Danjuma said firmly. "She came into our home as a bride. She will rest here." Zainab's parents, broken with grief, could not fight them. With heavy hearts, they watched as her body was lowered into the ground at the far end of the Danjuma's compound. Her mother wailed uncontrollably, throwing herself on the ground. "Zainab, my child, you left my hands too quickly. Why did God snatch you the very day He blessed you?" Her father said little. He leaned on his walking stick, his eyes glassy, his spirit defeated. Sul, her younger brother, clenched his fist but stayed silent, unable to believe his vibrant sister was now gone forever. The villagers shook their heads, whispering, "Oh, what a tragedy. Married in the morning, buried the next day." To everyone, it seemed like the cruel hand of fate. No one suspected the Danjumas. It had been 7 years since Zainab's death. The Danjuma mansion stood taller than ever, its walls freshly painted, its gates gleaming black. The family had grown richer, their businesses multiplying, their names whispered in town with envy and fear. To the outside world, they were blessed, favored, untouchable. Far away, in a small village near Kafina, a young woman named Aisha grew up under strange circumstances. She was found as a baby on the steps of a church. No parents, no note, only a blood-stained wrapper tied around her waist. The pastor and his wife who raised her always told her she was special, chosen by God. And truly, Aisha was different. From childhood, she had dreams so vivid they felt like memories. Visions of dancing in a wedding gown, of being surrounded by strangers, of fire, blood, and betrayal. Sometimes, she would wake in the middle of the night screaming, clutching her throat, convinced she had been stabbed. At night, the pastor's wife would rush to calm her, praying over her with holy water. But nothing erased the dreams. By the time she turned 23, Aisha had grown into a strikingly beautiful woman. Her skin glowed like polished bronze, her eyes carried a haunting depth, and her laughter, though rare, charmed everyone around her. Men flocked to her, but she always felt an emptiness she could not explain, as if her heart belonged somewhere else. One Sunday, after church service, an old prophetess visited the parish. The woman's eyes fell on Aisha immediately. She froze, staring at her as though she had seen a ghost child. The prophetess whispered, clutching her staff, "Where you come from is not where you belong. Blood cries from the ground for you. Blood not yet avenged." Aisha frowned. "Mama, I don't understand." The prophetess leaned close, her voice dropping. "The spirit you harbor seeks justice. She's back for what was stolen from her." The words pierced Aisha's heart like a blade. 4 weeks after, she could not sleep. The dreams intensified. She saw faces she had never met in real life but felt she knew: a stern woman with piercing eyes, a man with trembling hands holding a knife, a husband looking away as she screamed. She woke each time with a whisper in her ears, "Go back.